There is a myth in football, a lie so deeply embedded in the culture of the sport that we accept it without question. The myth goes like this: if a quarterback reaches the Super Bowl, he must be elite. He must be special. He must have carried his team through the fire of the playoffs and earned his place on the biggest stage in sports. But what if that is not true? What if some of the quarterbacks who reached the Super Bowl were not just average, they were actively bad? What if some of them were so limited, so overwhelmed, so thoroughly outclassed by the moment that their own teams won in spite of them, not because of their arm, not because of their leadership, but because a defense was so dominant, a running back was so punishing, or the opposing team collapsed so spectacularly that even the worst quarterback in the playoffs could stumble into football immortality? That is not a hypothetical. That is history. And today we are exposing it. But before I reveal the 10 quarterbacks who had absolutely no business reaching the Super Bowl, I need one moment of your time. This channel is brand new, and we are doing something different here. We are not recycling the same tired takes you have heard 1,000 times. We are diving deep into the real stories, the uncomfortable truths, and the hidden history of the NFL that the mainstream ignores. And we are growing fast, but we need you. If you love football, if you love hearing the truth even when it stings, then hit that subscribe button right now. One click, that is all it takes. Turn on the notification bell so YouTube tells you the second we drop a new video. We are building the greatest NFL history community on this platform, and I want you in the room from the very beginning. Subscribe right now and let us tear this myth apart. We start at number 10 with a quarterback so forgettable that even Dolphins fans have to pause and think before they remember his name: David Woodley, the starter, sometimes for the 1982 Miami Dolphins. And I say sometimes because Woodley was benched during the season in favor of Don Strock. That is not a minor detail. The coaching staff looked at David Woodley in the middle of a Super Bowl run and said, "You know what, we would rather play someone else." He completed just 48% of his passes that year. 48! In an era where defenses were not nearly as complex as they are today, David Woodley could not complete even half of his throws. So how did the Dolphins reach the Super Bowl? Because the defense was suffocating, because the running game was relentless, because everyone around David Woodley was performing at a level so high that the quarterback position became almost decorative. And when the Super Bowl itself arrived against the Washington football team, Woodley was so ineffective that he was pulled from the game. Pulled from the Super Bowl. That tells you everything. The biggest game of his life, and his own coaches decided they had seen enough before the final whistle. David Woodley did not earn a trip to the Super Bowl. He was dragged there by a roster that deserved better. At number 9, we have a quarterback whose Super Bowl appearance still baffles football analysts to this day: Rex Grossman. The 2006 Chicago Bears. Now, let us set the stage properly. That Bears defense was ferocious. Brian Urlacher was playing at a Hall of Fame level. The secondary was creating turnovers at a historic rate, and Devin Hester was single-handedly changing games on special teams, returning kicks and punts for touchdowns with a frequency that defied logic. And then there was Rex Grossman, the man tasked with running the offense. A quarterback who threw 20 interceptions during the regular season. 20! He did not manage the game, he sabotaged it. Week after week, Grossman would hand the ball to the opposing defense, and week after week, the Chicago defense would bail him out. The Bears did not win because of their quarterback. They won in a constant state of damage control, cleaning up the messes that Rex Grossman created. And when Super Bowl 41 arrived against Peyton Manning in the Indianapolis Colts, the charade finally ended. Grossman threw 2 interceptions, including one that was returned for a touchdown. The Bears lost, and absolutely nobody was surprised. The only surprise was that Rex Grossman had made it that far in the first place. Number 8. Craig Morton and the 1977 Denver Broncos. Now, by the time Morton arrived in Denver, his career was already on life support. He had lost his starting job multiple times, he was aging, he was limited,
and yet somehow he found himself starting in Super Bowl XII against the Dallas Cowboys. The Broncos' defense had carried the team through the season and the playoffs with a level of determination that masked every flaw the offense had, and there were many flaws. Craig Morton was the biggest one. In the Super Bowl, Morton threw 4 interceptions. 4! That record still stands today. 4 times Craig Morton put the football directly into the hands of Dallas defenders. The Cowboys did not just win that game, they won it so convincingly that the Super Bowl MVP was awarded to 2 defensive players. Not a running back, not a wide receiver, defensive players. Because the Dallas defense feasted on Craig Morton like he was serving them dinner on a silver platter. 4 interceptions in a Super Bowl. And yet, Craig Morton's name appears in the record books as a Super Bowl quarterback. The record books do not always tell the truth. At number 7, we have Chris Chandler and the 1998 Atlanta Falcons. Now, that Falcons team went 14-2 during the regular season, an incredible record. And on the surface, you might think, well, the quarterback must be doing something right. But when you peel back the layers, the truth reveals itself. That 14-2 record was built on the legs of Jamal Anderson, who rushed for over 1,400 yards and scored 14 touchdowns in a season so dominant that it earned its own celebration, the Dirty Bird. The Falcons' defense was opportunistic and aggressive, and the NFC Championship game against the Minnesota Vikings, a team that had gone 15-1 and was heavily favored, ended in a collapse so epic that it had nothing to do with Chris Chandler and everything to do with Minnesota self-destructing. The door opened and Chandler walked through it, but he did not kick it down. In the Super Bowl against the Broncos, Chandler threw 1 touchdown and was largely ineffective as John Elway and Terrell Davis dismantled the Falcons. Chris Chandler reached the Super Bowl because the universe aligned in his favor, not because he willed his team there.
And this is the entry on the list that makes Steelers fans physically ill to this day. O'Donnell was a game manager on a team built around defense. The 1995 Steelers had a roster loaded with defensive talent. Rod Woodson, Greg Lloyd, Levon Kirkland, Kevin Green. That defense was terrifying, and they carried Neil O'Donnell through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl against the Dallas Cowboys. And then, on the biggest stage of his career, Neil O'Donnell did something so inexplicable that conspiracy theories about it persist to this day. He threw 2 interceptions directly, and I mean directly, to Dallas cornerback Larry Brown. Not tipped passes, not deflections. O'Donnell threw the football to Larry Brown as if Brown were wearing a Steelers jersey. Both interceptions led to Dallas touchdowns. Both changed the momentum of the game. And Larry Brown, a defender who had done almost nothing notable all season, was named Super Bowl MVP because Neil O'Donnell gifted him the award on a silver platter. The Steelers' defense did everything humanly possible to win that game, and their quarterback personally ensured they did not. We are now entering the top 5, and these are the quarterbacks whose Super Bowl appearances are the most baffling, the most indefensible, and the most carried of all time. And the number 1 spot? It belongs to a backup, a man who was never supposed to be on that field, a man whose Super Bowl victory came down to a kicker missing a field goal. Not his arm, not his legs, a kicker's miss. Stay with me. Hit that like button if you are enjoying this, and if you are not subscribed yet, you are making a mistake. Fix it right now. Let us continue. Number 5, Stan Humphries and the 1994 San Diego Chargers. Now, let us be real for a moment. The fact that the Chargers reached the Super Bowl that year is one of the most unlikely stories in playoff history. Nobody expected them to be there. Nobody picked them. And when you look at how they got there, you understand why. The Chargers' defense was playing out of its mind during the playoffs. Natrone Means was pounding the football on the ground, and Stan Humphries was doing exactly what he was asked to do, which was not much. In the Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers, the mismatch was comical. Steve Young threw 6 touchdown passes. 6. The greatest single-game quarterback performance in Super Bowl history. And on the other sideline, Stan Humphries threw 0 touchdowns. None. He was invisible.
The Chargers were outclassed in every possible way, and their quarterback was a symbol of the gap between the two teams. Stan Humphries was a nice player, a solid professional, but he was not a Super Bowl quarterback. He was a passenger on a Cinderella run that turned back into a pumpkin the moment the clock struck midnight.
At number 4, we have a quarterback who will surprise some people, Jake Delhomme, the 2003 Carolina Panthers. Now, Delhomme has his defenders. He made some big throws, he had some memorable moments, but let us look at the full picture. That Panthers team reached the Super Bowl because of a ferocious defense and a ground game that could control the clock. And in Super Bowl 38 against the New England Patriots, Delhomme threw a critical interception that was returned for a touchdown, a pick six on the biggest stage in football. He also fumbled, and while the game was remarkably close, and while Delhomme did make some plays, the turnovers were devastating. The Panthers only stayed competitive because the Patriots made their own mistakes late in the game. It was a war of attrition, not a showcase of quarterback brilliance. And when the final seconds ticked away, it was Adam Vinatieri's field goal that decided the outcome, not Jake Delhomme's arm. Delhomme competed, you have to give him that, but competing and belonging are two very different things. Number 3. Kerry Collins, Super Bowl 35. And this is one of the most embarrassing quarterback performances in Super Bowl history. The Giants reached the Super Bowl largely because the NFC was historically weak that season and because their defense had been playing at an elite level. But when they arrived in Tampa to face the Baltimore Ravens, a team with the most dominant defense in modern football history, Kerry Collins was exposed in the most brutal way imaginable. He threw 4 interceptions. 4. The Ravens' defense did not just stop the Giants' offense, they erased it from existence. Collins looked lost. He looked overwhelmed. He looked like a man who had wandered onto the wrong field and could not find the exit. The final score was 34-7, a demolition, a humiliation, and Kerry Collins was at the center of all of it, throwing the football to defenders as if he had forgotten which team he played for. 4 interceptions in a Super Bowl, and the Giants had no answer because their quarterback had no answers. Kerry Collins reached the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl absolutely destroyed him. And speaking of Super Bowl 35, number 2 on this list is the quarterback who was on the other sideline that night, Trent Dilfer. And if you watched our previous video, you already know this story, but it deserves to be told again because it is the single greatest example of a quarterback being carried to a championship in NFL history. The 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense allowed 10.3 points per game. They went through a stretch of 5 consecutive games where the offense did not score a single touchdown. 5 games, 0 touchdowns, and the Ravens still made the playoffs because the defense was so historically dominant that the offense was borderline irrelevant. Trent Dilfer averaged fewer than 150 passing yards per game that season. He completed fewer than 50% of his passes in the Super Bowl. And after winning the championship, after hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, the Baltimore Ravens released him. They cut the quarterback who had just won the Super Bowl. That has never happened before, and it has never happened since, because no other organization has ever looked at their Super Bowl winning quarterback and thought, we can do better than this. The Ravens did, because Trent Dilfer had no business being on that stage. The defense won that ring. Dilfer just happened to be standing nearby when they handed it out. And finally, number 1. The quarterback who had the least business reaching the Super Bowl of anyone on this list. Jeff Hostetler, a career backup, a man who spent years holding a clipboard on the sideline, watching Phil Simms run the offense, waiting for an opportunity that was never supposed to come. And then, late in the 1990 season, Phil Simms went down with a broken foot, and suddenly, impossibly, Jeff Hostetler was the starting quarterback of the New York Giants in the playoffs, heading to the Super Bowl against the Buffalo Bills, one of the most explosive, high-powered offenses in NFL history. Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, the K-gun offense that could score from anywhere on the field at any moment. And the Giants knew with absolute certainty that Jeff Hostetler could not match that firepower. So they did the only thing they could do. They ran the football. They controlled the clock.
They held the ball for over 40 minutes of game time, the longest time of possession in Super Bowl history. 40 minutes out of 60. The Giants did not try to outscore the Bills. They tried to keep the Bills from touching the football. And when the game came down to the final play, when everything was on the line, the outcome was not decided by Jeff Hostetler's arm. It was decided by Scott Norwood's right foot. A 47-yard field goal attempt, wide right. The two most devastating words in Buffalo Bills history. Wide right. And the Giants won. Jeff Hostetler was the winning quarterback of Super Bowl 25. But that game was won by a defensive game plan, a running attack, a 40-minute possession strategy, and a missed field goal. Remove any one of those factors, and the Giants lose. Jeff Hostetler did not carry that team. That team carried Jeff Hostetler so carefully, so deliberately, and so completely that his job was essentially to not lose the game. And even then, he needed a kicker to miss a field goal to survive. That is not a Super Bowl quarterback. That is the luckiest man in football history. And that is why he is number one. And there it is, 10 quarterbacks who reached the greatest stage in professional football and had absolutely no business being there. 10 men who benefited from historic defenses, dominant running games, opponent collapses, and in one extraordinary case, a missed field goal. The Super Bowl is supposed to be the ultimate test of a quarterback, the place where legends are made, but sometimes it is the place where passengers are exposed. Now, I want to hear from you. Which quarterback on this list do you think got the most undeserved trip to the Super Bowl? And who did I leave off? Drop a comment right now. Tell me your pick. Argue with me. Defend a name on this list if you think I was wrong. Let us get the debate going, because that is what makes football the greatest sport on the planet. And if you made it to the end of this video, if you watched every single entry, then you are my kind of football fan, and I need you on this team. Subscribe to this channel right now. We are releasing content like this every single week. Deep dives into NFL history, stories that challenge what you thought you knew, and every single video is going to be better than the last. That is a promise. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, share this with a friend who thinks they know football, and I will see you in the next one.